you're a trade union activist, which just simplistically, I suppose, is sort of as left as it can be. That's the left, isn't it? And yet a lot of your views, for example, about that we should highlight grooming gangs, right? That doesn't seem to coincide with what a lot of the left are saying today. So is there a point at which you have to say, you know what, I guess I'm not a lefty? Or is it a case that the people who claim to be on the left today are not doing leftism right?
Well, I mean, I'm looked upon as a bit of a museum piece in the Labour movement now, but there would have been a time where the views that I espouse, and I would say economically, I'm probably as left as most people on the left, or certainly within the Labour Party. But some of the views I espouse around social cultural issues are now, frankly, seen as fascist in the Labour Party and the wider left. But I mean, of course, that wasn't always the case. I mean, the Labour Party has got a history of being a patriotic, communitarian party who, understood the concerns and the priorities in the lives of working class people, and working class people were proud to vote for it, and in many cases saw it as their party. But there's no question that certainly over the last 20 years and probably over the last 30 years, the Labour Party and the left more broadly has become a movement for what you might call the professional and managerial classes, a movement of social activists and student radicals and urban liberals and graduates living in our fashionable cities and university towns, and didn't understand, or understood less and less, the world beyond the M25, what you might call post-industrial Britain, what you might call working class Britain, small town Britain. And not only less and less understood those communities, but more and more came to regard those communities with contempt. And at the same time as they were kind of embracing on the left a militant, if you like, social liberalism, so they rejected the idea of the family unit, or certainly didn't want to voice support for that, and issues around patriotism, for example, and traditional values and so on. All of that was seen as a bit of old hat, and adopted a very kind of militant progressive stance. On that level, they also adopted a kind of economically liberal agenda. So in the days of Tony Blair, for example, adopted what I would call largely a Thatcherite agenda, placing undue faith in market outcomes, allowing the city to reign supreme, independence of the Bank of England, seeing government as a necessary evil and not much more than that. And I think as that process took place, I think more and more people just saw the Labour Party, who did once see the Labour Party as their party, no longer recognised it and thought, you don't speak like me, you don't look like me, you don't understand my life. Probably the best example of that was the Gillian Duffy incident. Where in 2010, Gillian Duffy, this sort of elderly voter in Rochdale, during the election, Gordon Brown was visiting the constituency and left his microphone on, and simply because she had raised quite mild concerns about the impacts of immigration in her community, she was called a bigoted old woman. But the truth was, and I know this because of my involvement with the movement, lots of people in the movement do see the likes of Gillian Duffy in that way. They do think that people who raise concerns over the impacts of mass immigration in their communities are genuinely bigoted people. So we kind of got to this weird situation where a lot of the Labour Party, they knew that they needed the votes of those people. They needed, in order to form a government, they needed the votes of those working class communities, but they didn't want to be seen with them in public. They almost treated them like some sort of embarrassing elderly relative. And whereas the Labour Party at its most successful has always been a coalition. It's been a coalition between what I call Hampstead and Hartlepool and Hackney, forgive the alliteration. But you have Hampstead, which is, if you like, the kind of middle-class, white-collar intelligentsia, always been a part of the party. You've got Hartlepool, which is the blue-collar working-class element. And in more recent years, you've had the Hackney element, which is the younger, more kind of urban, cosmopolitan voter. To be successful, the Labour Party needs to hold all of that together And when it has been successful, that's what it's managed to do. But as time went by, one element of that coalition, which was the Hartlepool element, the working class, blue collar, largely white working class, let's be blunt, it was looked upon by the party with contempt. So the coalition started to fracture. The party thought those people would never go Tory. They've got nowhere else to go. But they started to abstain in large numbers after about the year 2000. And then they did go to the Tories, as we know, in 2019. There's been a huge realignment in this country. Some people will say, but the Labour Party have now won all of those people back at the last general election. Not quite true. The Labour Party's support at the last election was wide, but very shallow. And if you look at the C2DEs, which is the occupational working class, the share that Labour won among that group did not increase between 2019 and 2024. So I'm not convinced the Labour Party can ever win those people back. We may be seeing, I think, the beginning of a very long-term realignment.
And would that then push Labour to try to win the votes even more of Muslims new to this country?
Well, I think there are some people in the Labour Party, and I've had this discussion with some people in the Labour Party who think, actually, we need to find a new constituency. That new constituency needs to be built around the young vote, the environmental vote, graduates, the city-based people. People who are kind of liberal cosmopolitan in their attitudes towards life. And that needs to be our new coalition. And we really need to forget about people in Hartlepool and people in Mansfield and people in Wakefield and people in Dagenham, where I grew up. Because those people are, bigots and nativists and xenophobes anyway. We don't really need them. I think two things about that. I think, first of all, I don't think that strategy would work, actually. I think if the Labour Party is to succeed electorally, it always needs to hold together as much of that vote. If it completely dismisses the Hartlepools and the C2DEs, then I think it's got real problems on its hands. But secondly, I think it would be a betrayal of the Labour Party's historic mission. Right. The Labour Party was created out of the bowels of the trade union movement. It was created to speak for marginalised working class communities. And if Labour did decide to go, do you know what, let's forget those people and throw our lot in with middle class liberals and environmentalists.
And Islamists.
And Islamists, and there's a certain amount of that, then not necessarily Islamists, but certainly the Muslim vote as they would see it, then essentially it's not the Labour Party as we once knew it.
Do you worry that we, especially with the lack of national identity now, we might be going to that path that Lebanon and Iran went through with rising numbers of Muslims and Labour incentivised perhaps to go for that vote?
I think that is possible, and I've actually said previously that we are seeing potentially the Lebanon-isation of Britain, where we are fragmenting into different discrete communities with their own kind of communal and sectoral interests.